us.
Aloha Hawaii, this is Poka'alai Nui. Today is the second day of September, and that yeehaw was from Brother Israel, Kamakavivo Ole. I am Poka'alai Nui. The time now is 7:33 on Sunday, the second day of September, and our telephone lines are open. We just had a caller during the music, and I assumed that the caller had wanted just to speak with me directly while the song had been playing. I'm sorry I didn't pick up the line, but if you would like to call, you can call back. I will put you on the radio because that's the only way I can answer your telephone call. And some of you may have wanted to make some corrections to misstatement. If I had made any misstatements, you can call and correct me. I am not averse to being corrected, and realizing that I oftentimes make a lot of these mistakes myself. I should point out that the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation is not a law firm made up only of Native Hawaiians. And so while I say that the attorneys were from the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation, so that's my belief, that doesn't necessarily mean that the attorneys themselves are Native Hawaiians. And we have had many cases in which non-Native Hawaiians have represented clients in the from the Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation. All our lines are taken up. Let's go to our first caller. Aloha caller, welcome to the program.
Morning, Polka.
Yes, good morning.
Hey, talking about rail. Last week, Thursday, I think it was Wednesday, they had that budget at the city council, and they were talking about the bus routes and everything.
Yes, I think I saw
Yoshioka was there, and he was being attacked, and then, of course, Berg came in and did his, Tom Berg. He attacked Mr. Yoshioka, so he should apologize to him and to the Hawaiian people for, not going through the proper process of the assessments for the,
for the rail
and everything else.
Yes.
And he was attacking Councilman Chang, and Chang was kind of scared for his life, I guess. And Haramoto, I think those two just left because they couldn't take the abuse and whatnot. I don't think it was appropriate, but he did get his point across the bird. Also, there was another meeting the next day. It was called for the handy van at the city council, and they had an update from Mr. Yoshioka concerning the performance of the handy van is not good, and he's mentioned 4 topics that they're working on. One was the subscription riders that use the program agencies use a lot. Medicaid, they have a lot of people from the Medicaid going on it. The scheduling, from going from a bus scheduling to some other schedule so it can alleviate the problem, and then the procurement, purchase some new vans. So, we all testified about the performance of the handy van. The council really attacked him on that too. And he didn't have too many answers to answer to some of the questions. One of the questions was they have this software called the Trapeze system that they're trying to use in the software. And Council Garcia asked the director, how long would it take? Would it take a week, a month, 2 months, or when do you think it'd be done? He had no answer to that. He had a private consulting company came in. It's been working on it for a while, but there's no timeline. So we really don't know what's going on.
Wow. There's a sense, I guess, especially after the primary election, that the city is essentially leaderless. And I heard from inside someone who works within the city that when they read the the decision by the Hawaii Supreme Court with regards to rail, they turned ashen. That was a very interesting description. But from what you report about what's happening at the council and the kinds of stuff, it does seem, and it is the case, because there's even no hope that Carlisle is going to be given any leadership, and instead he's just going to drag things out, it seems, staying with the program that he has already been on, notwithstanding the fact that Caldwell and Cayetano both asked that he start restoring the bus schedule, because they both have committed to the restoration of the bus schedule, and yet Carlisle is still on the same track, saying no, it's going to just stay this way for the next 4 months that I remain mayor.
Yeah, then people got to suffer. You know, us people are use of public services of transportation have to suffer. There was no plan B or anything from Mr. Yoshua for this bus thing. You know, if it didn't work, he should have had a plan B.
Yeah, and it's the same thing like in the debates where Cayetano asked both parties, is there any plan B for rail? And they said there need not be any plan B.
And when Kobayashi asked the budget director, you know, for the bonds that they want to make, she said, how are you going to pay us back if, you know, we can't take it out of the coffers of the taxpayers. That's against the law that is in the charter and whatnot. He had no answer.
It's a sad state of affairs.
Yeah, they should have got all their everything in order before they started building this.
Normally there's a common order that one follows. It's ready, aim, fire. Some people don't understand that very basic ready, aim, fire. They just say fire, okay, aim, okay, get ready, okay, fire again.
Yeah, you know, I commend my cousin's wife, Paulette Kilekini, for sticking up for what she's doing, because, you know, that's very important. It's a state law, it's also a federal law. And I respect the burial people, the Hawaiian people. And of course, my cousin passed away, but I'm glad Paulette is doing a good job. Come in there. I wish others would do the same.
And the thing is, she has been saying this for a number of years, calling attention to this error in the law and the process that the city, and all they did was saying, oh, sorry, the train has already left the station. There's nothing you can do. And so she was very tenacious in going after it. So I congratulate her and Native Hawaiian Legal Corporation as well.
Are you going to talk about George Cleveland?
Well, I would like to. I don't know if we have enough time. I have another caller on the line. Why don't you, now that you've raised his name, why don't you just tell the audience what about George Cleveland?
Well, what I heard is he's the great-grandson of President Cleveland.
Right, and he is in Hawaii.
They're going to have a reenactment, I think, today at Iolani Palace.
I think, I'm not sure what that reenactment would entail. They did have a reception for him at the Washington Place, Liliuokalani's home that sits right behind the state capitol, and I had attended. Were you in attendance there?
No, but I heard about it. But it's great that he came down. And you know, it's a lot of history right there. And I'm glad he's aware of what's going on, and other people are going to come out to the Iolani Palace. And
well, do you know what time the event is taking place?
10 o'clock and then they're going to have something in the evening.
I see.
But I think maybe another caller may call up and give you
and give us more information. Thanks for calling.
Aloha, you take care. Good job.
Thank you very much. Aloha. And we'll go to the next caller. Let me finish the discussion with regards to George Cleveland. I was in attendance. I was invited to Washington Place as well, and did attend for about an hour. And to be frank with you, although I have good friends on the side of those who provided and sponsored this reception for Mr. Cleveland, I must say I was disappointed. I heard the resolutions introduced or brought before us by the City and County of Honolulu. Mayor Carlisle did speak on behalf of the city, and recalling the events in Hawaii. There was Senator Brickwood Galatario, who acted as the master of ceremony and introduced Senator what's his name? I forget his name, who introduced another resolution talking about President Cleveland and what an upright person he was, and he was a good friend of Liliuokalani. And there were others who gave prayers and talked about the honor of Liliuokalani and Cleveland and what honorable people they were. I had not heard the word independence. I had not heard the word sovereignty mentioned for the 3/4 of the program that I was there, and yet they missed the whole point. Liliuokalani was not fighting to be a historical marker in our Hawaiian history. She was fighting for the independence of Hawaii. She was fighting for the continual struggle to obtain the right of self-determination for her citizens of Hawaii. And yet those folks who talk about the integrity of Liliuokalani fail to even mention for a moment the continuing struggle for pono in Hawaii. Instead, they simply waved around the authority of the people in office today, coming up with all of these great resolutions and banners and the rest, talking about how we respect that history. But in terms of the continuing march towards the right to self-determination, that was not mentioned. And so I felt somewhat disgusted, and I left early that gathering. Now, they may have said something after I left, or they may have sung some songs and the rest, but oftentimes songs, when sung without any real commitment, are merely songs, and if there's no statement, then I'm not really all that much interested in just waving historical documents around or proclamations around without any real oomph behind it. So that's my statement with regards to George Cleveland, and it's not really against him, but those who organize these events, but just going through the flatter and not any substance. Okay, we have been talking about rail, we have been talking about other aspects of history. Let's go back to our telephone lines and take the next caller. Our telephone number here is 524-1080. Aloha caller, welcome to the program.
Good morning, Polka. How are you this morning?
I'm fine. Good morning to you.
Good to hear your voice again. And the last caller, I agree. I'm very grateful for the sister who worked in earnest to gain the legal resources to ultimately lead in the Supreme Court decision. So I think he said it was his auntie. So most regards and aloha to her for her work and her allies.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you for Brother Is. It's a calming song. And I also love, I have a 13-year-old daughter,
yes.
And in our house we discuss your playing of the Song of Sovereignty. And it's a great way of using that medium, music and arts, as a way of generating new consciousness for a young, growing child. So I appreciate if there's any time to do that, and I'm not at all trying to tell you how to run your show. I just want to thank you for doing that.
And I'll play it at the end of this program. Thanks for mentioning it.
Oh, good. We'll be sitting around listening, and we'll also be talking about. Hey, I did want to briefly wonder if I could make a brief statement that deconstructs our weekly shows and call-ins as a way to illuminate how to illuminate a process of empowerment, and very briefly try to make this in the minds of many people. The challenges that you have discussed today and weekly represent impossible dynamics for substantial change. And then I think there are some people who believe in their heart that we must and we can make the impossible inevitable change for the future. But I do see a process of empowerment. Very briefly, there are maybe 4 elements of it, and I see it occurring on the show. And I know there's a sister who calls in regularly who, from my perspective, emphasizes a feminist perspective, which I very much strive to live in my life. So perhaps what I'm about to say It certainly has to do with values that you talk about, but it may also represent my own conditioning as I get to the last point. As a male, a haole male, and it may also reflect some of unintentional dominance in my own intellectual thinking, and I really would appreciate the sister who is, I think her name may be Elizabeth, who is strong in that. You know, if I deconstruct the radio show, I think about the broader society, I think there are 4 maybe stages that are kind of reflected in our society. And these have to do with dealing with the challenges that we face as a society. One is people are become aware of all of the issues that we're talking about on this show and others, and they become overwhelmed and numbed. This numbing and sense of overwhelming leads to a sense of helplessness and hopelessness. And there's a large number of people who, can you still hear me?
Yes, I can.
Who experience this, sense of hopelessness and helplessness, and the dynamics of materialism and drugs and alcohol and other forms of pleasure issues, help them vent this sense of helplessness. Then there is another stage where people are aware, they like to discuss what's going on, and it kind of stops there. And I see some callers, and Polka, I am not in any way making judgments. I'm trying to describe and deconstruct what I see and hear. And the discussion will stop there. And that's a good step to move out of helplessness and hopelessness. Then there are callers on the show and in our society who are aware of issues, they seek more information, and they're really good at critically reflecting on their own perspective. I hear people changing some of their views and values a little bit on the show. And finally, there's less people who are aware, who critically reflect on issues on the show and in our society, but they are very action-oriented. Now, this group is a very small group, this last part, and yet I would argue that the combination of information sharing, critical analysis, and then discussing issues of action is the essence of what we need to consider as a society. The issue of the rail, a woman who joins with allies, goes to the Supreme Court, I think that inspires many of us who are at the stage of critically reflecting, gathering information and awareness. My hope is, and again, it's not to be a dominance perspective, is that could we balance, and there is so many people listening in your audience who know of agencies or churches or synagogues or schools or universities where there are groups that are implementing action strategies to make what some people believe is impossible, to make it inevitable for change. Lastly, real quick, I read your editorial comments on the work we're doing for the litmus test. They were excellent. I sent you an email that looks at some slight modifications.
Yes.
But I'm building on that by talking about my personal values. It may be male, it may be haole, but I really embrace and hope that the listeners can inform us of churches or other organizations, healthcare organizations that are taking action so that we can move together to a new commitment to action. I'm sorry for being so long, but I'll take your comments off the air.
No, you weren't too long, and thank you very much for your contribution.
Thank
Aloha.
you.
And okay, let's go to that was Michael, and you will become more familiar with him. And I always appreciate his summarization and the conciseness that he's able to present these things. We have about maybe about 5 minutes more. We do have another caller, so I'll take that caller, and then I will be reflecting on Michael's comments and perhaps engaging this caller. Aloha, caller. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, Poga. I heard the call, and I'm responding to it. As best I can at this moment. I would like to have more time to give it further consideration. My thoughts have been somewhat distracted this morning. But I do appreciate what he's saying and appreciate his attempts to understand this side of the world, and which he does a very good job of anyway. I had another point, but it's kind of... Well, my first response was rather strong, and oh yes, it was to say that to hold these gatherings in any place that contains symbols of any kind, that means flags, religious symbols, reverse collars, nuns' habits, priests' cassocks with skirts, anything like that represents their institution, and that's what they are, institutions, built on this kind of suppression. I'm sorry to say, but that's what I see. It is not wise to attend meetings where those symbols are present. And at the moment, that is my initial response.
Okay.
So thank you very much, Poca.
Okay. Thanks for calling, and thanks for all your contribution. Aloha.
You're welcome.
And all right. So, given that, let me speak to Michael's summary of these 4 areas of where an audience may be, and just reciting what he has said so we can catch everyone up. He says people become aware, and yet they become overwhelmed by the massive information, and this overwhelming can at times equate to numbness, a sense of helplessness, a sense of hopelessness, and so what happens is that they try to find ways of venting, and at times there's no opportunity for venting, and perhaps either this radio show or other ways that they can vent. But I think there is a need for that venting, and at least it gets to overcome the depression that can follow by being so overwhelmed. So, and even if they vent using this radio show, or you can call Carol Cox in the next program and vent on his program instead, which will follow not too long from now. So anyway, that's one response. Another response is people who enjoy the discussion as an intellectual exercise and leave it just at that, and then continue with life as if there is no change. Others who will do critical reflection and at least change their position on a topic. And then the next one is not only take critical reflection, changing positions, but then deciding to take action. And so finally, how can we understand who are those groups in the community which are taking action, so more action-oriented. So the discussion is good. I think the discussion is necessary to bring about critical thinking. And I think many of these stages are important to go through, but I don't think that people are necessarily locked into these stages. I think these stages are all opportunities for eventually reaching the final stage, and that is to take action within a democratic society. But the first step, the most essential step, is you need an informed public. Not only informed, but you need a public that can see that critical thinking is taking place and participate in the critical thinking, even if it is merely as an audience listening and not necessarily calling in and participating in that discussion. It is very important. Okay, so I see
Kaulana na pua o Hawaii Kupa ama hope o ka aina Iki mai ka elele o ka loko ino Pala pala anunu me ka paka Pane mai Hawaii moku o ke ave Koku ana honoa o Pilani Ka ko o mai kaua I o mano Pa'aku me ke oni o ka puhi hewa Aolea e kau I ka pulima Maluna o ka pepa o ka enemi Po o hui ai nā ku ai hewa I ka pono sibila a o ke kanā